Hey guys, we wanted to give a shout out to some of the people we have met while recording the Nashville Dads podcast. On this episode, we wanted to highlight Brandon with Nashville Restaurant Radio. If you're interested in the Nashville food scene, this is the podcast for you. Brandon has some of the most influential people in the Nashville restaurant community on his show. So check it out. Follow them on Instagram at Nashville Restaurant Radio. Welcome to another episode of the Nashville Dads. This week we have on therapist Andrew Chapman from Wild Heart Meditation Center. We talk about making friends as a dad, staying sober, meditation, and how kids change your life. We hope you enjoy. Andrew, I specifically wanted to have you on the podcast because almost every episode we end up talking about therapy, mental health, meditation, and sometimes yoga also. And I feel like it's kind of all your thing is to be very well versed in that world.
Yes.
So tell us what you do for a job. What do you do for a living?
Sure. Yeah. So I was the director at Wild Heart Meditation Center, shout out, located in East Nashville for 8 years. I stepped down in a year and a half ago.
Okay.
I guess January of 2023.
Okay.
But I still teach there every other week. So that was a huge part of my life for a long time. And I got my start in mental health teaching basically like emotional regulation, emotional skills, learning groups at treatment centers and a variety of settings, public library, things like that. So I did group therapy for a long time or educational groups, and now I'm a mental health therapist in private practice. So see people individually mostly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a huge part of my world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think every man that we seem to talk to is like, I should probably have someone else to process my life with besides my wife.
That's great to hear. And
Yeah.
I mostly see men, and I actually have questions for y'all too.
Yeah, we'll see if we have any answers.
Okay. Just because y'all have a great sample selection for this podcast, but I mostly see men in my therapy practice. I also see women, but it tends to be men that are around our age. And yeah, I think it's awesome. More and more men are interested in coming to therapy, and not because their partners told them, but because they want to come to therapy. And it's been really wonderful to see it. You know, it's like guys are looking for connection and, you know, someone to process and understand their lives better. Yep. So I'm here for it. Yeah, that's awesome. My question for you, can I ask you a question right off the rip?
This is pretty free-flowing.
Okay, so, like, one of the things I've been seeing both myself but also as a therapist and seeing in other people's lives is that as men get older, you know, I think we grew up with a generation of dads that kind of became more socially isolated as they got older, unless they were really cued into like a religious community or maybe played golf or something like that. But so I'm seeing a lot of like 30-something men, whether they have kids or not, really struggling to connect and make friends. And if I can get a little gushy for a second, like one of the things that I really appreciated about you, Devin, is I remember you from Belmont because you were so like kind and outgoing.
Thanks.
And you like made an effort to talk to me, and I find that I'm like going through these skills that I think came a lot more naturally when we were younger because you have people around, you have built-in social communities. My question for y'all is like, how do you find friends as aging men, not middle-aged, but as we get older? Like, how do you find friends, and what do y'all think, like, how is your definition of friendship change or the structure of it change? I know that's a lot to bite off, but yeah.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first.
Okay.
You start a podcast. That's how to some extent, though. I mean, I think male friendship is always like a thing that ends up also getting discussed in our episodes is how do you maintain friendships? Well, I think, most of us were raised by dads who just did their job their entire life, and then they get to the end of their career, they go to retirement, and unless they were heavily involved in a church or something like that, they don't really have many friends whenever they retire. And I think already you have that like huge blow of to someone's identity and ego, basically, of you retire, your purpose that you just had for what probably 40 or 50 years suddenly is now gone. And then who do you process that with? So I think if I were to guess or speculate, I think a lot of people our age are seeing that happen to their dads, basically, and not judge their dads for it, but be like, oh man, that could easily be me. And I think most of what our podcast, trying to meet up with dads and go on dad walks, is dads just being really eager to be intentional with other dads.
Yeah.
And I think that is really all the dad walks were mostly Justin's idea to do them. And how many people are very much like, oh, wow, you guys just walk and hang out as dads? How many times can I come?
Right.
So like it's this, I think fatherhood, male companionship is fascinating because once you dangle the line out there, it seems like there are lots of people who are just like, please, 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 please. But you have to have someone who's willing to be embarrassed, basically, to be like, hey, let's do a dad walk. Only Justin and I showed up this week. Cool, that's kind of embarrassing. I guess we'll go on a walk and talk to each other and get to know each other. But there are these little risks that could easily lead to like blows to your ego that you have to take to be willing to start new friendships, basically.
Right. Which comes with any attempt to be vulnerable,
Yes.
I feel like. Yeah. It takes a risk.
Yeah. I mean, starting the dad walks and joining a club like that, that's how I've met so many dads.
Yeah.
And became friends with Doug. And basically, walking with Evan, have become even more of a friend with him. And just everybody that we have met has been awesome.
Yeah.
So having that dad walk, it sounds cheesy when you first hear about it, but when you actually come, every dad's like, dude, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I wish we had this before.
Yeah.
I remember Doug.
Yeah.
And I've said this multiple times on this podcast, but Doug is now one of our dads that constantly walks with us, but his son goes to the same daycare as my daughter. We were just chatting it up one time when we were picking up our kids at the same time, and I said, well, I have a dad podcast, and we do dad walks every Saturday. Would you want to come? He was like, Justin, I've been talking to you for over a year now, and you've never said any of this. I've been looking for this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I am so sorry. I will do better next time.
Yeah.
But dads are craving, and I don't know about single kids. I've been totally out of the single realm for a long time, but they are craving that community.
Right.
And in this podcast has just been such a great tool. But
and that's my second question about like how has your definition of friendship changed? Because like part of what I'm hearing is that having a platform, whether it's a walk, that's scheduled and it's a thing, or a podcast, is like we have lives as dads that require a lot of responsibilities. And like our dads, some of us, have to work a lot. Some of us don't, but we all have a lot of responsibilities regardless. And so I think when I was in college, I could just go hang out because I knew that's all that we were doing. Maybe someone had to work that night, but they would be free the next night.
Hanging out on a quad, playing guitars, just
100%.
dicking around for like 4 hours. Yeah.
And I find that a lot of guys really miss that type of spontaneous connection. And I think going back to the piece around like the embarrassment or like the risk of being vulnerable is that like asking for someone to hang out, right? Or like planning, which can feel like another responsibility to hang out, and prioritizing that can be a barrier for a lot of people. And I know it is for me. And so my definition of what a friend is has had to kind of change. And just curious for y'all.
I mean, the main way I keep up with other friends is since I'm from Southern Indiana, it's like 2.5 hours from where I'm from. One of my best friends from high school lives down here, and we do Nashville soccer club tickets together because it's a guaranteed, like, all right, they do 18 home games this year. That's 18 times we're guaranteed to hang out. That's unless you text me and say, I can't make it this week. Like, that's the only other way I know how to maintain a friendship. And that's not even like necessarily like a super deep, like vulnerable friendship. It's just like, I think it's good to be aware of what friendships you have that are like, you lead with vulnerability, and other ones you're just like, can I just feel like a normal person and be casual? Because I want both of those. I don't want every single friendship to be like this super deep, intense, like 100%. Here's every ugly thing I've ever done in my life.
You're speaking my language as a therapist. Yes, sometimes you just want to hang out.
Just be casual. Just be like, hey man, so who'd you have to win March Madness this week? Right. You know, like.
Well, I mean, for me, I had, I still have one of my best friends from when we were 3, but we barely ever talk. But when we do talk, it was like we just picked up from yesterday.
Yeah.
But and then I've had a friend from college that kind of went through a divorce and did a lot of moving around and getting his life situated to where we've dropped off from that. And then I had another friend who had a deep connection with, kind of betrayed me.
Yeah, that sucks, man.
So I lost that. Sorry, I'm tapping, but
No,
I
good.
lost that that friendship of that deep connection. But with you, I feel like I've been able to reignite that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it took some time.
No, I think trying to make friends in your because like, and I'm a weird person. I have a lot of very like niche interests and stuff like that. So like, if someone has a similar interest to me, I feel like I have to like not come on too strong. To be like, oh, do you also know this random band from the early 2000s? Cool. So like, did you see them live ever? Because I saw them like 10 times live. So I just want to know how weird can I get with you? Because like. Because that's another thing. By the time you get to your mid-30s, you're aware of how you're pretty weird.
Yeah.
And like, so whenever you meet new people, you're like, all right, I'm going to keep this slight barrier up because I want you to still talk to me. And like, I'm a weird person.
Yeah.
So how do I?
That's what I love about you, dude. You
Yeah,
are
but
weird.
that's great. I mean, that's refreshing, I think, too.
Yeah.
is maybe you've got to rein it in a little bit, but you know.
You got to know when you're isolating people with being weird and like
Sure.
niche, and whenever you're being inclusive is normally like the metric I do. In my
Yeah,
head
yeah.
Of like, if I make this obscure reference, is this just about my ego? Cool. I shouldn't make it yet until
Right.
I know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
So, how do you make friends? How many friends do you feel like you have a decent male community of friendship that you have around you? Or are you looking for it?
So, full transparency, I mean, I've been embedded in a couple communities that are very large. You know, I'm in recovery, so the 12-step community is very large. I've been clean for 18 years.
Oh, congrats, man.
Wow.
So, yeah,
congrats.
thank you. So, you know, since I've been in Nashville, I've been a part of that community, which has an embedded support system.
Yes.
And then also I've been a part of the Buddhist community, and it's a small but growing community.
Yeah.
And there's built-in friendships, you know, through going to your Sangha, which is, you know, your Buddhist community, and participating. So, you know, there have always been people around, and my whole life I've been like, I'm the type of person that wants to go to a place that has a built-in community. I grew up going to the skate park.
Oh, cool.
Then I started playing in bands.
Yeah.
And then I, you know, got into recovery, and then I got into Buddhism.
Yeah.
And so I've always found that like having some type of place that has that embedded has been really helpful. And I find that like most of my friends center in those circles, but I'm open beyond them as well.
Cool.
You know, but it was challenging for me to find friends that were dads for a period of time. I mean, our daughter was born 6 months, and then the pandemic started.
Yeah.
You know, and so we were just getting our feet wet on like going out and starting to meet people and hanging out with other couples. And now I find like it comes a little bit easier, you know, but there was a time where it was a tough transition because not a ton, there are people in recovery and in the Buddhist community that have kids, but I'd actually say that the sample size is pretty small.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, other than our group of friends from our neighborhood, I have Chris and Aaron and Marcus and Jason. They were all dads before I was. So I joined the club when I actually had my first kid. So I was kind of lucky in that aspect.
That's interesting too. We were the first amongst our friend group
really?
to have kids.
Yeah.
For a while, for a good couple years.
That's actually, I should ask that question to people more often, because we had our first kid whenever we were 28. And for a lot of our friends in our like circles and stuff, we were like one of the last ones to have kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so like, whereas like for you, like, yeah, you weren't like, by the time I had my third kid, you had your first kid. So it's always fascinating to zoom out and look at what pond you're in, basically.
Yeah.
Because you could easily have been there and been like, whoa, like why, like if you would have just gone 2 streets over, you might have been the people with the youngest kid in the group.
Right.
So what the hell did you do with that?
Yeah. And even just the lifestyle is different all of a sudden. You know, it's pretty dramatic. Like my friends, and I got resentful, I think, but I also could challenge it because my friends were inviting me over to hang out at like 8 or 9 at night.
Yeah.
And I was like, they never want to hang out. And I'm no, they're inviting you to hang out, but just your life has changed. My life has changed dramatically since in a couple days,
These random calling me over at an hour beforehand ain't cutting it
exactly.
anymore.
And that's how we used to hang out.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think one of my favorite quotes from I'm a really big fan of 6 Feet Under, which was like an early 2000s HBO show. And like the season finale, there's this moment in which like the matriarch of the family basically looks at one of their characters and says that like motherhood is one of the loneliest things you can do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one thing that actually applied to like fatherhood a lot, is like fatherhood has the potential to be one of the loneliest things you can possibly do, because your identity gets changed so much basically like overnight. I will usually tell people I feel like becoming a father feels like you studied for a test for 9 months, and then you get to whenever you take the test and you realize that like you're supposed to be studying math, but you're studying like English this entire time.
Yes.
And you're just sitting there and you're like, I studied the wrong thing this entire time. And like, I don't know, you can add in like social media culture, and like, how do you find other people that walk through life with you is basically one of the hardest things to find, because I know I'm doing stuff wrong, but I want you to also admit that you're doing stuff wrong too, because then I'll actually give some more.
Yes. 100%.
So I do think even without a pandemic, fatherhood and motherhood can be one of the loneliest things you can do, because you are the only, even like with your partner, there can easily be dissonance there, because you both will experience moments with your child so drastically differently, but you're desperately trying to figure out how to go through it together. And that takes humility, that takes mental presence, that takes all these things that don't come naturally to your day-to-day life.
Right. And I think that's very true, that being able to share where we struggle is a big piece of connecting and feeling less lonely in it. Because I think, like, for me, having our daughter, it on paper, I mean, I was older, I had a career, on paper, we were ready.
Yeah.
We had even been trying to have a kid for a year by the time we conceived. So, we were ready on paper, but once you get there, right, it's like, it's a lot different. And a lot does change, and having other people be like, yo, man, how are you sleeping? Or, hey, like, have you been out and hung out with anyone? And are you able to get childcare? And like, how have your parents been participating? And like, all of that stuff.
Two things that I have learned from just having the one kid is to get out of the house, have your parents take them just for a couple of hours and get out of the house. That is so important. And then sleep. Having somebody that can maybe take over for one day, like your parents, if in the middle of the night, let you sleep, because that's sleep deprivation. For me, at least, that was the hardest part of the whole process of becoming a father.
Yeah, it's wild.
You can't prep for it, because it's like, oh, I did all-nighters in college. I know what it's like to not sleep and still be a functioning adult. And then your kid wakes up for the third night in a row, only sleeping 2 hours at a time.
Yeah, and it's not just not sleeping; it's like waking up to crying.
Correct.
And
So you're like instinct, like your animal instincts almost immediately kicked in. Like, I need to protect something. What's going on here?
And at least for me, I wasn't in my early 20s where I could do multiple all-nighters.
Oh yeah,
and my body would recover and my mind would recover. Now, I mean, I'm going to be turning 40 this year. And I definitely, like, it takes a lot longer for my body to recover.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
We're getting old.
We are, man.
We are. Are you like 36, 37 also?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I feel like 40 is, like, I remember when I was younger thinking of 40 as, like, grandparent.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah.
And now, as I'm going to be turning 40, I'm like, where the heck did time go?
Mm-hmm.
Man, you got to just... I keep on saying the Click movie.
It's all right. You can
Just
love
the
Adam
fast-
Sandler. It's okay.
I
It's
do.
all right.
I love him, man.
It's
But
all right.
yeah, but the fast forwarding
Yeah.
and just feeling like you just forgot everything that
Yeah.
went through past your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
How old is your daughter now? Is she like about 5-ish?
She's almost 5.
Okay.
Well, in July she'll be 5. Yeah, she's 4.5, and I mean it's amazing. It's you don't have words for it, but
No.
like she's just a person of her own, and it's like the best experience I've ever had. Especially having a baby is tough, man.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
like
Well,
no
she was,
personality, just lots of needs.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know?
Yeah.
She was a couple months old, I guess, when COVID
Yes, 6
happened.
months. Yeah.
So I bet that was even harder for you to navigate.
Well, she just started being fun, right?
Yeah.
That's when they start to smile.
Yeah, 6
and they
months
start
is like, oh, this is cool. You're not as fragile.
yeah, and then it's like, okay, now we're gonna just be alone for
Yeah.
Totally.
a long time, especially in the beginning when
Yep.
we thought the world was literally ending.
Yep.
So, but yeah, she's 4.5, and she's awesome.
Yeah. What's her name?
Ray.
Ray? Oh, cool. Yeah, that's right.
R-A-E,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because you guys are big Star Wars fans.
That is like the only cultural reference.
Sadly, yes.
I think it's gonna probably go away. People won't remember the first.
Unless they make some more. I think they're going to
yeah.
make more Star Wars movies with
Yeah.
Ray. So,
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
She can rise in popularity.
She can. Yes.
Yeah, it was my grandfather's name and then my sister's middle name, and
Oh,
we
cool.
liked it as a girl's name.
Cool,
And
yeah.
so
Where was your it was your father's middle name?
it was my mom's dad's
Oh,
first
okay.
name.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was spelled the same way?
He spelled it R-A-Y.
Okay.
He was
cool.
Raymond and spelled it Ray,
Yeah.
R-A-Y.
Cool.
And she's R-A-E.
I like that. That's a pretty cool name. Might have to steal that.
Go for it.
Go for it, man. Why, this is a just random question. Since we went to Belmont at the same time, I didn't know you didn't live on campus.
That's correct.
Why didn't you live on campus? I feel like that's also how
So-
I made all my friends was just living
Do
in
you
a
want the
freshman dorm.
short? Do you want the short story?
Well, I
or
mean,
the
like when do you
medium
need to go to
story?
bed? That's the question.
Do the long story.
It can
long
be
story.
Tell
it
us
can be
all
a
the
timely
details.
story, but yeah, I mean, so the real details.
I'll do the wrap
are-
it up single.
Sure. Are that because I think I do have somewhat of a unique way of getting to Nashville.
Okay.
I forget if I said this on the pod already. I did. I'm in recovery,
Yeah.
right? So, part of my story is that around like 14, 15 years old, I started using drugs, but I started very quickly using hard drugs and started selling drugs and got arrested and kicked out of like several schools.
man.
And ended up getting arrested with 3 felonies in November of 2005.
Oh, okay.
And
Were you a minor?
I was 18.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I wasn't living at home. I was basically living at a dope house, like a flop house,
Yeah.
and got a call set up with my lawyer. And he was like, "You're going to go to prison for 11 months and 29 days. And he's like, I can't see a pathway where you don't end up going to prison. And he said, the best you could do is to go to an inpatient rehab facility. And he said, there's maybe a chance you can get your long-term probation and get your sentence deferred, and eventually wiped away or whatever. And so I was like, all right, I'm definitely going to do that.
Yeah.
So how I got to Belmont is first I went to rehab in Nashville. I went to Cumberland Heights and went there for 30 days, got out. My attorney said I can postpone your court date if you go to sober living. And so I stayed in sober living and went to court, and an abundance of privilege along with the work that I'd put into my recovery, helped to get the judge to defer my probation to Davidson County. And so I got to stay here. I was staying in an Oxford house with a bunch of vets, a bunch of other parolees from prison, other people that were new in recovery but that didn't have any money. We were paying $100 a week, and I was staying with 10 guys in a small house off Edge Hill that's now like a massive, whatever. But so I was staying there, and I'd always wanted to go to Belmont. I'd heard about it because I grew up in Chattanooga, and never thought I could get in.
Yeah.
And so I applied, and I ended up getting in, and I asked them special permission for me to live off campus because I was scared that it was going to be just a bunch of people partying all the time.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so I also had a lot of baggage against Christianity, which as a kid, was about witnessing hypocrisy of people, not of what I would say people that were spiritually connected in their Christian faith, but people that were more authoritarian,
Yes.
Adults. And so I was also a little apprehensive to go to Belmont because of that.
Yeah.
And I had one of the most positive experiences of my life going to Belmont. It was incredibly healing for me because how I made friends was people approached me. Like I was so anxious. Like
That's fair.
I had been,
That's fair.
just even being a student, right?
Yeah.
Like very anxious.
Yeah.
I sometimes think to qualify it as someone that also had been self-medicating while my brain was developing for years, but also just being a kid and like people were so welcoming. And I mean this, Devin, like I literally remember you were in a bunch of my classes. You may not remember me, but I remember you because of how kind you were.
Okay.
And you like made an attempt to say hi. I was friends with Oscar and Alan Brown
all those guys lived
and
in
Jared
Pembroke at the same
Simba.
time.
Yeah. And they all approached me and like, some of them drank and partied a little bit, but it was about the friendship. I just met the right people for that time in my life, and so that's how I got to stay off campus.
I was in a halfway house.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
that's so. Man, never would have guessed that at all. That's crazy. I just assumed you lived like in Maddox or in a different dorm,
right? Yeah,
and you just like hanging out in Pembroke more.
Yeah, well, and I think part of my plan was to not really draw any attention.
I wouldn't either. So, hey, what's up? My name's Andrew. I'm in recovery. How are you today?
Yes, exactly.
So,
yeah. So, but it was a great experience, and then a lot of my baggage around Christianity melted away.
Cool.
Actually, through going to the Understanding the Bible class.
Yeah.
Is Belmont a Christian school?
It was definitely Baptist whenever we were there. I'm not sure what affiliation they have now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a TBC.
I had no idea.
Right?
It was Baptist, and then they unaffiliated while we were there. I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
And they're still Christian.
Okay.
And they still require, some convocation and understanding of the Bible, like some curriculum. But yeah, it was wonderful. I had Dr. Judy Skeen, and I was trying to be all rebellious, and she was like, yeah, how about that? That is interesting. Let's think about that. Let's talk about that. And I was like, wow, what a wonderful way to have discourse.
No, you were met with, I think that's the hardest thing for me about traditional Christianity is the lack of curiosity. I feel like it's normally approached with like, but this is right. And I'm like, but can I be curious about things? And they're like, no, because this is right. And I'm like, but if I get curious, I can also come back to that answer. And then I'll actually believe the answer more because I wrestled with it.
100%.
And I also feel like growing up, most Christian leaders were very much just like, but this is the right way to do it. I always think of Pete Holmes has a story of like being over in Israel or somewhere. And like he was on a tour and a guy was like, this is where Jesus healed the blind man. And he just walked home. And Pete Holmes was like, so you're telling me this guy had never seen before in his life? Yeah. And he just walked home. Yeah. So he had no human reaction, no human interaction with anything. He just suddenly saw it and was like, oh, I know my way back home. I'll see you guys later. So you're taking out all humanity from this story because you're being overly legalistic. Of it says he was healed, he went home.
Right.
You don't want to add any human element to this. Well, it's what the Bible says. And I'm like, where's the curiosity, man?
Yeah.
Where's the human element?
Well, and what is spirituality without our ability to contemplate, and contemplate our lives in the context of what the spiritual tradition's teaching us?
Yeah.
It's something that I really connected with in Buddhism.
Yeah.
And not that I think every religious tradition, because people make up religious traditions, has people that are curious and people that are contemplatives and people that are human centric and you know, in their approach. And that's something that I connected with in the Buddhist teaching, is because it was so much there's this word in Pali Sanskrit, ehipassiko, which means to come and see for yourself. And it's like, you know, okay, you don't have to believe, you know, but if you really honestly look at your experience, what do you see?
Yeah.
And it's more of a question mark rather than a, well, I'll tell you what you're going to see.
Yeah.
It's like, no, what do you see? And
how did you get affiliated with Buddhism?
yeah, so a few years into my recovery, I cleaned up my life a lot. Like I stopped using drugs, but with that comes like living with more integrity, like being more honest, being more committed to my responsibilities, developing friendships, you know, all of these things. I cleaned up my life so much, but I reached a point a few years into my recovery where I was still very depressed, I would say. And I reached out to a friend that ran the meditation center at that time. It was just getting started. I think he had maybe called it Against the Stream. That was our old name. And I reached out to him and I was like, hey, man, like, that seems like a very peaceful activity. I don't feel peaceful inside. Like, what can I do? And it was, for me, I kind of think I do everything a little bit addictively. Like, once I started learning, once I started meditating, it just really made sense to me. And so that's how I started getting connected, was through a friend that was facilitating and basically was the founder of Wild Heart before it was Wild Heart.
Nice.
Yeah.
What benefits do you feel like you see from meditating?
So, you know, that's such a good question.
It's also kind of, I hope I didn't phrase that in a way in which is like, what's good and bad about meditating? What's your experience with meditation and what has it taught you? I guess is really the question I want to ask.
I think it's a fine question. It's just interesting because I have my like off the cuff answer to it because I've taught it so much. But if I really think about it, I mean, there's twofold benefit. Like on one hand, you can look at it as like a health promotion activity, right? Like meditation does help you to focus. It does help you to regulate your nervous system. It helps you to detach from ruminating thoughts. It helps with creativity in that regard because it kind of, a lot of when we're talking to people and a lot of when we're, you know, like I think part of what the creative process is like this equal listening and responding. And so it's very like in the moment and spontaneous. And so meditation helps with that. So there are all these like health promotion benefits, you know, like that they promote the health of your nervous system. They promote the health of your brain, your cognitive functioning, all of those things. And then I also feel like there are existential benefits, you know, like spiritual benefits. And that comes from contemplating impermanence and really like actually what Justin was talking about before is like, we see how quickly time passes.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what is it like to really actually think about that?
Yeah.
You know, and like on a daily basis, and some Buddhist practices are really deliberate about that. There's this practice called the 5 reflections, which is I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. I'm of the nature to become ill. I have not gone beyond illness. I'm of the nature to die. I've not gone beyond death. I will be separated from everything that is dear to me in this life. And I'm the owner of my actions and the heir of my actions. All that I own are my actions. Wow. And so it's this kind of really deliberate contemplation on impermanence. And, and it's not to try to arouse fear and this kind of morbid, you know, like nihilism. It's to kind of like look at the preciousness of life. And that I would say is more of a spiritual benefit.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and so... yeah, and it can go as far as people want. And I'm actually a big fan of meditation being used outside of a spiritual context too, like in a secular. I've taught meditation classes at the public library.
Cool.
It's like if we can help some people that are working downtown on their lunch break, relax their body and feel their breath,
check in with themselves.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
I used Headspace, the app, and that was really cool. And I mean, it really grew from when I first started to, I guess it was 2 years after, of all the different types of meditations that they do. So if you can't actually do something person to person, that is a great app.
Yeah.
It really is.
Headspace is a wonderful app. Yeah. There's a lot of them now, and I'm like, I think it's awesome that it's taken off. And I was trained in a curriculum called Mindful Schools, which is about teaching mindfulness in schools, and not anything obviously explicitly. I say explicitly because it's not like people are teaching Buddhism. It may have came from that tradition, but I feel like it's inherently a pretty secular practice. We all have that ability. They call it metacognition, which is that ability to be aware of your thoughts and aware of your feelings rather than just in the thoughts and the feelings. So it helps kids develop that really important part of their executive functioning, which is developing until they're like 22 or 23.
Yeah.
So it's like you're like taking them to gym class, but for their brain.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was really cool too.
Yeah. Did you do you still do your podcast about it, or have you stepped away from that also?
Yeah. Can I give a shout out?
Yeah, give a shout out, man. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just called Wild Heart Meditation Center, and we still do it. Now we've expanded it, so there are a bunch of different facilitators. We have a YouTube channel as well.
That is cool.
Shout out to my dude Mikey Noshul, who's now the new guiding teacher and director. He's really been stepping it up, and every Wednesday we put up a new one. I think there are like probably 400 episodes or something like that. Yeah, it's been going since 2000, maybe 15 or something like that. So,
and it's basically just like a little guided meditation.
So we have some meditations on there. They're mostly called Dharma Talk. So it's for people that are interested in learning about Buddhism or psychology or kind of like a combination of both. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
In relation to Buddhism, one thing I think about with like Eastern practices, I feel like also being born in the Western world, I feel like most of what we're taught growing up is how to hold things tighter and how control is basically the way to success.
Yeah.
And I feel like most Eastern practices are the concept of like, how do you let go of everything basically and just let things exist.
So this is really interesting. I don't know if it'll interest your listeners, but
one of the
things that is really has been popularized that is originally a Buddhist practice is mindfulness. And it's interesting that mindfulness is what has caught on in the West because it was the thing that the Buddha taught last.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And you'll look at like, even if you look at yogic practices like asana practice, like the postures that you do at your yoga class, right? Like asana, from my understanding, was taught as a way to help ease the body into meditation, right? And so that's often disconnected from, you may do shavasana at the end of your yoga class for a few minutes, but yogis in India are just doing those postures for a little bit to meditate for an hour afterwards.
Fascinating. Yeah.
And so the same thing with meditation is it's the thing that's kind of taken off, but the Buddha taught, similar to all religions, like the importance of living with integrity and these kind of humanistic values of like non-harming and, what all these basic things we find in spiritual practices. He also taught loving kindness meditation, compassion meditation, gratitude meditation. And so he also spoke a lot about generosity and service. And to your point, Devin, I think it's because our culture is very much immersed in this kind of self-improvement and this kind of like, how can I fix myself?
All problem solving.
Yes. And so that control piece is a really funny paradox because it's like, I want to meditate so I'm more productive.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like pitched within a lot of these kind of like motivational, you know, whatever movements, which are also probably helpful to a lot of people. So I don't want to throw only shade, but
there's good in it.
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, a lot of times it's like if you meditate at the beginning of your day every day, you're going to be more productive and make more money.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
You know, and it's like very counter to that idea of like not detachment, but engaged non-attachment from outcomes.
Yep.
You know, it's like, no, you're going to do better because like some of the things that you want won't happen, and that's okay because you're going to be able to accept those things. You know?
Yes.
It's like, heck yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I'm a really big fan of Richard Rohr, and he kind of incorporates Eastern like ways of thinking into Christianity, basically.
Yeah.
And one thing that he has said before that always strikes home to me is that most pastors will start the biblical story in Genesis chapter 3, which is the fall. So that is basically problem and then problem solution. We messed up. We now must have a solution that solves this problem, as opposed to starting in chapter 1 and 2, which is basically there was all this chaos. There was all this darkness. Look at all this light. Look at all this beauty. Look at all this great intention. Most pastors jump to like, well, he messed it up, so we better fix it.
Right.
And it's like, what those first 2 chapters are pretty, that's a pretty meaningful base to start on, guys. Like, you're kind of skipping, I feel like, a lot of the like, I would say a lot of people who grew up in a traditional Christian faith question their self-worth a lot because a lot of it is taught to them as you messed up and now you're lucky that God was willing to save you.
Right.
That doesn't do a lot of good for your self-esteem.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you can start in the first 2 chapters of like, there was chaos, there was darkness, look at all this light, look at this beautiful intention, and ego gets in the way, it kind of changed. Like whenever I read or listened through that for Roar, it kind of changed. It unlocked a lot of like feelings of guilt and shame I'd had within myself where I was able to like let them go, basically.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the number one thing that I see with people. I get the luxury of being able to have like a peek into people's intimate emotional lives. And I think like enemy number one or frenemy number one of what's going on inside of us is guilt and shame, you know, and a lot of feelings of unworthiness, and whether that shows up as like an inflated sense of confidence or a deflated sense of confidence, a lot of it comes from feeling like we need to measure up, you know? And so, it's fascinating. We're all just trying our best out here to,
Pretty much,
to find a way through, you know?
Where'd you, I'm assuming, did you finish undergrad, then went and got your master's?
I did, yes.
Where did you get your master's at?
I got my master's at TSU.
Cool.
It's a joint program between TSU, Austin P, and MTSU.
Okay.
And an additional 2 years.
Nice.
I was told myself after my like final finance exam, or whatever my last exam was in
SWOT
undergrad.
analysis.
Yeah. I was like, I'm never doing this again.
Yep.
And I did.
What made you want to become a licensed? You're a licensed therapist, correct?
Yes.
Cool. What made you want to become a therapist?
So, I mean, we graduated during the height of the economic recession. 2010 is when I graduated. 2008 is when things started taking a downward turn.
Yep.
I had studied music business, like
me too.
many of us, right?
Yep.
And couldn't find a job.
Nope.
And I think there was like Live Nation rolling cables.
Yeah.
And
I didn't want to be on the road.
Yep.
Nope.
And being on the road. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go play music. So I played music for a couple years, worked at restaurants, my time back.
Was it, I'm sorry, just a sidebar, was it hard to stay sober in any of that? Because there's a lot of unsteadiness. I feel like addiction is pretty huge for people with tour and who work in the restaurant industry. Congrats on staying sober through that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, fortunately in Nashville, the recovery community has a lot of experience with being a musician and staying clean. And so, you know, that was nice to be able to garner experience and, you know, hop on the phone and check in with people and go to meetings all over the country. And, you know, you got to prioritize it. But, and it was also a struggle at times.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Like, you're on the road for like the 3rd month in a row and like, you know, the rest of the band's going out for a drink.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, well, I also would like that drink.
Exactly.
But I do not have just one. So,
yeah, you can only sit on your hands so much.
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah, so it just made sense for me getting into Buddhism. And not having a real career path. And I was like, all right, what is the profession of helping people?
Cool.
And I looked at social work, and I really liked their ethics and I liked their history. You know, social workers are basically like, we're obligated to help people regardless of what we think about them and regardless about what society thinks about them. That means not just the people that we as society thinks we want to help, but also people that are sexual perpetrators, people that are living in prisons. And like, it's like, okay, well, how do we help these people that we've deemed as morally unacceptable people? And I was like, that's really rad. You know, like these people are out there really doing this work. And and so I got into it and mostly went the clinical route. So I function as basically a outpatient therapist. Yeah.
How do you like doing private practice so far?
I love it, man. I mean, especially being a dad, like the flexibility of being able to keep my hours. And I'm a morning person now, thanks to my daughter.
A lot of people become morning people.
You know? And so I'm like...
Did you just have the one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we just have the one. You have one as well?
Just one?
Yeah. And you have 3?
I have 3.
That's right.
Yep.
So, yeah, the flexibility is great. I love what I do. I think it's like it really is an honor to like get an intimate peek into people's lives and that they trust you with that and you can watch their process. And so it's a very special job and you can make decent money and, you know, you've got to kind of balance your emotional capacity a little bit differently. And that was a big struggle for me becoming a dad. It's just like you go home and it's like I have a kid that is having tantrums and is upset and wants things and wants attention and needs attention and all of those things. And then I have 20 clients I see a week that
could be mentally exhausting.
So, but I hope I found a pretty good balance with that. Yeah.
And I think it's that fun realization of being a parent where how your kid regulates their emotions is how you treat their emotions, basically.
100%.
And at the end of the day, I'm a stay-at-home parent. So, like, even if I don't go to an office or anything like that for 9 to 5, still by the time it's like 6, if a kid has a meltdown, I'm like, I don't know how to be kind anymore.
When you've been with them all day, it's like the patience fact. Distress tolerance is like another level for parents.
I mean, going back to work was really, really hard to try to figure out how to still, like, deal with a very newborn baby. But also having to deal with the pressures of work, man, that was super hard.
Yeah. And there's no line of advice that someone gives you.
No.
They're like, oh, cool, that works. That makes sense. It's like, no. My wife and I's relationship has drastically changed, and we're trying to figure out on the fly as we take care of a human. And also the people I work for haven't stopped their needs of me.
Yeah.
So what do I do with this?
I bet that was exceptionally hard for you. Just, man.
Yeah, but I mean, I imagine for anybody, like regardless of what your circumstances, like you're saying, it's just such a transition. And it's like, as you're talking about that, I was thinking about people going through grief. And that's often how they describe it, actually, is like, this person just died that I love, and yet I'm driving to work and everyone's like smiling and listening to music. And not that everyone is, but it appears that way. And it's like, how do I go on knowing that this thing has changed? And with having a kid, it's not like you're, you know, experiencing a loss. I mean, you are in some ways, but like you're trying to kind of like act as if life is normal, or at least people are acting as if life is normal to you.
I totally slept more than 3 hours last night. Let's do this phone call. Let's do this.
Yeah, and you're like, not there.
No, not at all.
Not at all. Yes. The amount of just pure exhaustion during that first 2 weeks or so is just so immense.
Well, I think, Justin, if I can speak for you, that experience is what actually led you to therapy. Is all of that broke you so much and made you feel incompetent, honestly, in so many ways. So you're like, all right, ego, cool, you're getting put by the wayside. I apparently need help.
Yep. Yeah, it took me a while because of my ego.
I mean, it takes a while because everyone's ego.
But it was basically fighting with Haley and saying, no, I can figure this out on my own, and then finally realizing, oh shit, I can't. And I think that was during the startup of our podcast, or it was like a couple months after. Having that therapist to be able to talk to was great, and I did that for probably, I don't know, six-ish months.
Mm-hmm.
But then being able to do this, I feel like has been something that I can do instead of having an actual therapist.
Yeah.
Well, it's having nice. Him and having whatever dad that we have.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have someone, and I also don't think therapy is for everyone, although I think most people could benefit from it if they found a therapist that's a good fit, but like, I think also like as men, in the conditioned realm of men, like we are often overly self-reliant, and it's like just so nice when we get to that point of desperation where it's like, I can't do it. I need help. It's so nice to hear that someone's on the other side, like ready to listen and like support you emotionally and like validate some of the things that you're struggling with and the fears that you have. And we don't even know that we're afraid a lot of the time. It's like, no, I'm stressed out. And it's like, well, you're stressed out because you're trying to do all of these things because you're afraid you're not going to be able to do them. Mm-hmm. And when someone's like, I hear that, like you have gone through so much change and you have so much on your shoulders, and look at how much you're trying because you care so much. It's like, oh, thank God.
It is fascinating how whenever you feel seen, how much your shoulders like kind of rest a little bit. I think, I know, pretty big on hopefully just trying to make people feel valid in the fact that they exist. Yeah. And it's pretty lucky to be able to exist.
It is. I mean, it's not I think it's probably one of the more important things. I know when I go through my day acknowledging people and like being a little bit more kind and understanding people have their own stuff going on, like the response I get from people is always so much more connecting.
Yeah.
So it's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
What, do you have any other questions for us?
Well, yeah, let me think.
Yeah.
Let me think.
You can now host the podcast for the next 10 minutes.
Cheesy question, but like, where do y'all, if you use your imagination and you just go there, like, where do y'all see, what's a fulfilling life at 55, at 60, 65? Like, what, and it can be really personal. It doesn't have to be like what you think the textbook would say, but for you.
So like in 10 years for you, you
son of a biscuit eater.
15, I said 55. 16, 15 and a half.
15 and a half. Sorry, Justin.
Let's say 20 years for me, because the 15, I don't see too much difference for me. But in 20 years, hopefully I'll be retired and I mean, hopefully living somewhere else other than Nashville. I would love to, and I'm taking part of yours, is somewhere in Colorado in a cabin, secluded away from everything, so I can just hang out with my wife and go kayaking, go hiking, do whatever I need to do.
So being in nature is in the cards. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, nature has always been, I went to school for landscape architecture. So, and I worked for landscape companies in high school, worked for a golf course. So I have always loved the outdoors and just being in nature. So something like that.
I will say, so in 15 years from now, it would mean my youngest kid would be either about to go off to college or he'd be 17 or so. So he'd probably be on like the cusp of graduating college. And my hope is that my wife and I have stayed healthy, been good with our finances so that we can actually travel and see the world. And that like, I don't know, talking about, honestly, this is a pretty good moment to discuss this also, of how many people have, whenever they left the house, when their parents became empty nesters, their parents got divorced because their parents, through the reality of raising children, became disconnected. And once the unifying factor left, so did their love for each other to some extent. So I really hope that my wife and I are able to figure out how to still laugh at and with each other for the next 15 to 20 years, and that whenever all of our kids are gone, that we can actually like figure out how to travel together, that hopefully we're healthy enough that we can actually do it. and that we can. I know that one thing that we always discuss is the thought of like if our kids go to college somewhere out of state, somewhere else, is like the fun potential of visiting them, and just being like, what's your world like here? Let me into your world. What's the restaurant? What's your life? Just let me pay for everything. Let me be a part of what your day-to-day reality is like. Yeah. And granted, they probably won't want to do any of that because they'll be 20-year-olds and not want to talk to us. But, like, I have that hope of, like, I really care about the, like, quiet moments of everyday life. And I hope to still be able to experience that with my wife and kids in 20 years from now.
Yeah, I love that. I love both those answers. I ask it because, like, it sounds like such a typical thing to ask, but, like, I'm often interested, I think because I watched my dad work a lot. Yeah. And I love my dad. I've actually rekindled a relationship with him recently. He just moved to Nashville. Okay. We've been spending a lot more time together. But, I've watched him now being able to connect more. But like a huge gap of his life after his kids were out of the house and after he didn't have to work, really struggling to find a way to feel fulfilled. And and I always want to keep myself accountable to what that is for me. Being open to the fact that it could change. I could want something different over the next 10 to 15 years. But, like, I try to ask myself two things. Okay, why can't I have that now? Yep. And not in a judgmental way, but, like, if that's what I want in 15 years, do I have to wait for it? Yeah. And then the other thing is how can I ensure that I'm headed towards that? Like, am I living in a way that's going to bring me to that? Yeah. And those are often some hard questions to ask myself. Yeah.
No, because it's, I don't know, I'm constantly fascinated by the concept of idealism versus reality. And what my ideals are and what my reality are. Hopefully they line up, but that usually takes a lot of work for them to, because we can always build it's really hard to make the dream you had be reality. Or, it's like, there's always some dissonance between idealism and reality,
Well, and I think
there's always a fairy tale.
To some extent.
Well, and I think vice versa too. And that's, I think, one of the reasons I'm interested in that question for people is that I think oftentimes we use reality as an excuse against our ideal. Yeah. I know for myself that my life is a lot different than it should have been. And my life is a lot better and a lot different than I would have ever thought it could be. And it was because of what I thought I was capable of, and then what I found out I was capable of when I had to do some hard stuff, and so I think in both ways, like, I can get caught up in the ideal and struggle for it and try to control myself towards it and always feel like I'm not measuring it up, or I can also settle for the reality, at the same time. So
it's a really weird balance of when you come to terms with reality and when you strive for idealism. Yeah. I feel like it's another just internal stressful point of existing.
Yeah. So here. Thanks, guys, so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And thanks for saying hi to me all those years ago and Audio Engineering 1.
Right, RecTech.
And
So how we end our episodes, we ask every guest the same 5 questions.
Okay.
All right.
So Justin will ask the first.
Yeah. Did you have any backup names for your kid?
Ooh, good question. Yes, we were going to name her middle name as her first name, which is Frances. And we were going to use her first name as her middle name, Ray. So she's going to be Frances Ray Chapman or Ray Frances. We went with Ray Frances.
Oh, nice.
And if she was Frances Ray, we were going to call her Frankie.
Frankie? Oh, cool.
Okay.
Nice.
We have a Frankie in our neighborhood.
We do. Francesca, right?
Yep.
Next question. Do you have a favorite TV dad?
Who came to mind first was Bob Saget.
Yeah.
It's a common answer, man.
Once we knew who he was, but understand probably why he was that way, because he played, I don't know his character's name on Full House.
Danny Tanner?
Danny Tanner. Yeah. But that's who came to mind first. Yeah,
that's awesome.
I'll go with Danny Tanner.
That's fair.
All right. Least favorite kids show?
Oh, my...
one that just drives you
I feel an
nuts.
allegiance to my daughter because she loves it the most is Paw Patrol.
Oh, yeah.
She loves it the most, and I love it because she loves it. But There's nothing in there for adults.
No.
There's no interesting plot.
No cute side comments.
No.
No snark.
Yeah.
Just problem solving 101 with 5 to 6 puppies.
Glad we have not gotten into that.
Yes, not yet. You will one day. Next question. What's your favorite kid's toy? Like whenever Ray plays with it, what do you actually enjoy playing with her also?
There are a lot of things. She loves to do arts and crafts. So if I have to pick one that we love to play games.
Oh, cool.
So we've got like a kids charades game where
Yeah.
you don't have to read as like a picture. And I'd say hands down, playing any type of game together.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Last question as I open up my phone. Moment of your kid's life you are most excited to be a part of?
The thing that I feel the most pride in today that I imagine will continue is when I see her in a candid moment being herself around other people. And so just getting to know her friends, getting to know her through her choices, that she makes, that's what I'm most excited for. Her making friends and seeing her laugh and it not just being with me. I mean, I think it's also going to be sad, but it's also, I think the thing I'm most proud of.
Yeah, I think whenever you start to realize your kids' personality, it's a really cool and really exciting thing. And then, to understand what their personality is like whenever you aren't watching, it's also just a really fun journey.
Yeah,
so,
big time.
If anyone, this is like an opportunity to do self-promotion. Do you want to mention like your Instagram, anything like that? How do we find you? How do we learn more about you?
Sure.
Self-promote.
I think the most important things are the things that I'm a part of. Of course, you could reach out to me if you want therapy. But I think I would like to plug Wild Heart Meditation Center. I call it a Buddhist meditation center. There's obviously no obligation to identify as Buddhist. Many in our community do not. The format is guided meditation for about 20, 25 minutes, a talk on a topic that we hope is relatable to anyone. There's often some Buddhist teachings in it, and then there's an open community discussion, and that's it. There's no devotional practices. It's a nonprofit, so you can give money if you want. There's no set fee. So Wild Heart is there. We have classes Wednesday night at 7, Friday night at 7, and our biggest one is Sunday at 10 a.m. Yeah. And so feel free to come to that. You can check out the podcast, Wild Heart Meditation Center. Check us out on YouTube. We have a silent meditation retreat, which we didn't talk about, but I've spent about 7 months of my whole life in complete silence on meditation retreat. Whoa. And so that's, you don't have to do a whole month, but if you want to do 3 days and practice, that's coming up in July. So I'd plug that. And then also Experience Therapy Group. I'm a partner. We have wonderful therapists that work for us. We're located in East Nashville. We do experiential therapy, which is not experimental. It is ways of participating in therapy beyond just traditional talk therapy. So we, of course, do talk therapy. We've got to use words, but also like other ways of engaging with people, whether they're processing therapies like EMDR, brain spotting, or expressive arts therapy, psychodrama. There's a lot of really creative ways to engage in the therapeutic process. So if you've been to therapy before, but you're like, I maybe want something a little bit more centered around a specific piece of work or to look at something a little deeper, it's called Experience Therapy Group. And hopefully we could help you out.
Nice.
Cool.
Well, Andrew, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks again for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at the Nashville Dads and subscribe to us on Apple and Spotify podcast. We record at New Light Podcast Studio and episodes are produced by me, Devin.